wife told husband. I'm cheating with your boss, and there's nothing you can do. The words cracked through the quiet kitchen like glass shattering on tile, words no husband ever expects to hear from the woman he built his world. Liam Carter, a hard-working construction engineer who spent 14 years serving the very man who now owned his wife's heart, stood frozen, his calloused hands trembling, his pride bleeding behind steady eyes. Across the counter, Amber, once the woman who prayed for his safety at every job site, now smirked like a stranger, dripping in arrogance and designer perfume paid for by the boss who signed Liam's paychecks. She didn't whisper. She declared her betrayal with a cold certainty, daring him to break, daring him to fight back. But instead of shouting, Liam only stared, silent, dangerous, unreadable. What kind of husband hears his wife confess to cheating with his boss and says nothing? What kind of woman destroys her home and still feels untouchable? And what could a man who just lost everything possibly do that would soon shock her more than her own cruelty ever could? The sound of heavy boots thudded across the linoleum before the door swung open. Liam stepped inside, sweat streaking his dusty face, the smell of asphalt and machinery clinging to him. He'd finished the project hours earlier than scheduled and driven home with a grin, picturing Amber humming in the kitchen, the kids' laughter spilling from the living room. But the house was silent, too silent, except for the slow tick of the wall clock. Amber sat at the counter in full makeup, a silk robe glinting beneath the warm light. Her wine glass was already half empty, and she didn't even look up as he dropped his tool belt with a metallic thud. "You're home early," she said, her tone dry as paper. "Wrapped up ahead of schedule," Liam answered, trying to smile. "Thought I'd surprise you." Amber smirked, swirling the wine. "Guess surprises go both ways." The words didn't fit. "What's that supposed to mean?" She picked up her phone, thumbed the screen, then slid it across the counter. The phone landed between them like a loaded weapon. Liam leaned in and froze. Messages. Dozens of them. Grant Weston, his boss. Flirtation turned filth. Hotel names, photos, dates that matched nights she'd told him she was at her sister's. He felt the floor tilt under him. "You're joking, right?" Amber finally met his eyes, expression flat. "No, I'm done hiding. I'm cheating on you with your boss, Liam, and there's nothing you can do about it." The kitchen light hummed above them, the only sound between the heartbeat thundering in his ears. He searched her face for even a trace of guilt. Nothing. Just cold, glittering certainty. "Why him?" His voice cracked on the question. She lifted her chin. "Because he's powerful. Because I'm tired of waiting for you to become something. I deserve better than coming home to a man who smells like concrete." She gestured toward the house, the cabinets he'd built, the floor he'd laid, every inch paid for with sweat. This isn't enough." He swallowed hard, words scraping out. "You could have told me you weren't happy." Amber's smile was razor thin. "I'm telling you now." A long, aching silence hung between them. Liam's hands trembled, his throat too tight to breathe. He could have shouted, begged, cursed, but instead, he nodded once, like a man acknowledging a sentence passed. He turned, opened the door, and stepped into the night. The wind was cold, and as he stood under the porch light, the truth settled. The woman he'd built a life with had just burned it down, and she'd done it with the one man who controlled his entire career. He didn't know it yet, but that night wasn't the end of his story. It was the ignition. The next morning, the air in the construction, the yard felt heavier than cement. Liam walked through the gates, every pair of eyes tracking him with half-hidden smirks. He didn't need to ask how they knew gossip in Weston developments moved faster than concrete dried. A few whispers, a few laughs, and suddenly, the man who once commanded respect was a punchline. Grant Weston's sleek black SUV gleamed near the office, polished to perfection under the morning sun. The sight of it twisted something inside Liam, but he swallowed the anger, keeping his stride steady. He'd learned early in life that showing pain gave people power. "Carter!" Grant's voice boomed from his office door as Liam passed. "Got a minute?" Liam stepped inside. The office smelled of leather and arrogance. Grant leaned back in his chair, jacket off, tie loose. The kind of man who thought success meant untouchable. Heard Amber told you everything, Grant said, his tone almost amused. She did, Liam replied, jaw tightening. Grant laced his fingers, eyes glinting. Look, man, it's not personal. These things happen. You're a great worker, and I'd hate to see this situation affect your job. Then don't let it, Liam said evenly. Grant's grin sharpened. Of course, if you ever feel too uncomfortable, I could offer a severance quiet exit, full pay. Let's keep things professional. It was like being punched in slow motion. His boss, his wife's lover, offering hush money for his own humiliation. Liam wanted to crush the man's smug face, but instead he stared, eyes hard as granite. I'm fine. Just here to work. Grant chuckled, dismissive. Suit yourself. Liam turned to leave, and just before closing the door, Grant added, She'll come around. Women like Amber always want what's better. That line followed him the rest of the day better. He finished his shift in silence, but by the time he got home, silence no longer meant peace. Amber was there again, sitting on the couch, her expression strangely calm. 3 small suitcases stood by the door. The children's toys were gone from the shelf. His pulse quickened. What's going on? I'm taking them, she said flatly. The kids? Where? She didn't blink. To their real father. Liam stared at her, heart pounding. What do you mean, real father? I'm their father. Amber laughed, a cruel sound. No, Liam, you're not. You never were. They're Grant's, all 3 of them. The words hit harder than any punch. His knees went weak. You're lying. I'm not, she said coldly. And that 4th baby you thought I lost the stillbirth while you were in Nevada? I sold it. To a couple who couldn't have children. The money I got helped Grant start his business. So technically, your only real child built his success. He froze, staring at her as the world fell apart piece by piece. You sold my child? Our child, she corrected. But don't act shocked. You were never enough to give me the life I wanted. Grant was. The words echoed in his skull. His vision blurred. Every memory, every laugh, every touch died in that moment. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. Amber grabbed the suitcases, opened the door, and turned back with one last smirk. There's nothing you can do. When the door shut, the silence screamed. Liam sank to the floor, chest heaving, rage and heartbreak tangled in his throat. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine started, his wife driving their children to another man's home. He stayed there until the house grew dark, then whispered to himself, barely audible, There's always something I can do. The rain came without warning that night, pounding the roof as if the sky itself shared his rage. Liam hadn't moved from the living room floor in hours. The photographs on the mantel stared back at him. Amber's smile, the kids' faces, all lies painted in cheap frames. He reached up, grabbed one, and for a moment, almost smashed it but stopped. Rage was easy. Revenge demanded patience. He dragged himself up, grabbed his jacket, and stepped out into the storm. The drive to Weston Developments was a blur of headlights and fury. By the time he parked outside, his body trembled, but not from cold. He needed answers, real ones. Through the glass wall of the top-floor office, light still burned. Grant never left early. Liam moved quietly, each footstep deliberate. As he neared the door, he heard laughter, Amber's voice, unmistakable, cutting through the rain's rhythm. You actually told him about the kids? Grant's voice was low, amused. Amber chuckled. Every bit. You should have seen his face. He looked like he'd been buried alive. Grant laughed, the sound oily and arrogant. You're cruel. I'm honest, she said. And I told him about the baby too, the one I sold. He deserved to know his only real child helped fund your empire, Grant whistled. You actually told him that? You're a devil, Amber. You love it, she teased. The words hit Liam like a hammer to the chest. He pressed his back to the wall, rainwater dripping from his hair. His vision blurred. The baby she'd sold, the only child that was truly his, and the money She'd given it to Grant. She'd taken his blood and turned it into the seed of another man's success. Grant's voice broke through the static of his thoughts. You know, you didn't have to sell the kid. I would have given you the money. Amber scoffed. You were broke then. We both know your business wouldn't exist without me or without him. Grant chuckled. You're right, that fool doesn't even realize he works for his own money. Something inside, Liam snapped, but not loudly, quietly, fatally. He turned and walked back into the rain without a word, his heart cold, his steps steady. At dawn, he made his first call to Logan Pierce, a private investigator he'd once hired for a corporate background check. I need you to find a child, Liam said, voice calm but lethal. Sold about 7 years ago. The mother's name is Amber Carter. Start with adoption networks, hospitals, anything you can trace. Logan's tone shifted instantly. You're serious? Completely. Days turned into weeks. Liam buried himself in work, pretending nothing had changed. Every night he came home to silence, his mind running through every moment of his marriage, every lie. Then, 6 weeks later, Logan called. Found him, the investigator said. Boy, 7 years old. Lives in Aspen with a wealthy couple, the Harringtons. The child has a medical condition, spinal defect. Can't walk. Liam froze. You're sure? DNA confirms it. He's yours, Liam. Liam's throat closed. He sat down hard, the phone pressed to his ear. Does he know? No, Logan said gently. He doesn't even know he was adopted. The Harringtons treat him well. They love him. Liam nodded slowly. Send me everything. And Logan, keep this quiet. Not a word to anyone. When he hung up, he opened his laptop and stared at the Weston Developments logo glowing on the screen. Every line, every project, every dollar had come from him. Amber and Grant thought they'd humiliated a construction worker. They had no idea the man they betrayed owned the very empire they flaunted. And now, he had 2 missions. Reclaim his son and destroy them both, brick by brick. Liam woke before dawn, the house a dark shell that used to hum with small noises. He moved with a quiet that belonged to people who had learned to hide storms inside their chests. By day, he showed up at Weston sites, grease on his palms, a hard hat tucked under his arm, playing the part everyone expected, the stoic foreman whose marriage had fallen apart. By night, he became something else, entirely, a careful, patient architect of ruin. He called in favors he'd never spoken of at the office. Former clients who owed him for past work, a retired corporate lawyer he once lent a hand to, even a discreet bank officer who still answered his calls. No one knew the whole picture. Each person received only the piece of the plan they needed. Liam never flaunted his real identity. He let people keep thinking of him as the man in a stained jacket, because arrogance was a weakness his enemies would exploit. Let them smile. He would build silence into a weapon. Logan Pierce fed him updates in guarded texts and late-night meetings at a downtown diner. No offices, no paper trail. The boy in Aspen, his boy, had a name the Harringtons called him by and a medical file showing a congenital spinal condition. The Harringtons loved the child and had paid for treatments. They were kind, oblivious to the theft that birthed their family. Liam breathed a complex relief. His son was not neglected. The relief sat alongside a hollow rage that tightened like wire. He would bring the child home, but first he had to break them without breaking him. At the same time, Liam built a case that would make Grant's empire look like a house of cards. Evan Turner at City Planning became a quiet ally, old laughter and beers after college translated into trust. Evan quietly flagged irregular approvals. He forwarded scanned copies of suspicious filings that didn't add up. Liam read each line with a fast clinical fury. Shell companies, duplicated signatures, invoices paid to ghost subcontractors. He set up an encrypted drive and began to store everything Logan and Evan fed him. He didn't rush. He methodically bought time. When Grant offered severance, Liam pretended to consider it, then shook his head. In meetings, he laughed at the right jokes, carried lunches into the field, and wiped dirt from his hands in front of the men he'd once led. He cultivated humiliation like armor. People underestimated a man who appeared defeated. Underestimation made him invisible. Privately, he secured legal counsel, an old litigation attorney with federal experience who understood white-collar crime. They drafted complaints, civil affidavits, and contingency plans, waiting to be deployed at the precise moment the public would notice. Liam paid in ways that would not show his ownership. Trusts, offshore accounts set years ago for other projects, all legal, all layered. He funneled resources to Logan so the investigator could move faster without flags, travel, private DNA testing, discreet legal filings in Colorado and Aspen. He also arranged quiet medical consultations for the boy, ensuring top pediatric neurologists would be ready the moment custody routes opened. At night, he read his child's file until the words blurred. He learned the boy's laugh from Logan's recordings, smiled at the small quirks that matched his own, and promised himself little things he would one day teach him: how to fix a leaky faucet, how to read blueprints, how to walk with courage when the world tried to bend you. On an autumn evening, 2 weeks after Logan's confirmation, Liam sat across from his lawyer in a narrow office, smelling of lemon cleaner and old paper. The plan was set: simultaneous legal pressure on Grant's companies, public exposure through a trusted reporter, and a sealed motion for custody once the Harringtons were shown the truth. Their eyes met, and the lawyer said, "When we move, it'll end him." Liam's hands were steady. "It has to end clean," he said. "No collateral damage to the boy." His voice bore iron and a tenderness that surprised him. Beyond revenge, a promise burned: to take back what was his and to raise the child in a life of truth. He walked out into the chilled night and paused on the sidewalk, feeling the city breathe. He had started a plan that would topple 2 lives, Amber's and Grant's. He had no illusions about being a savior, only a man who would take what had been stolen. Somewhere, the world shifted a fraction. He inhaled, tasting rain and bent metal, and let a small, dangerous smile form. Liam arrived at the Weston Project launch with the same quiet that had become his armor. No swagger, no pleading eyes, just a hard hat tucked under his arm like a memory. The hall glittered with investors and council members, crystal chandeliers throwing light on faces that smiled like payment receipts. Grant moved through them in a tailored suit, his smile a practiced blade. Amber clung to his arm, laughing with the sort of bright ease that used to belong to family photos. Liam watched them from the back, breathing slow, every muscle tuned to the moment he'd rehearsed 100 times. When Grant stepped onto the stage to speak about growth, trust, and community, the room leaned forward. Cameras rolled. Reporters scribbled. Liam walked to the AV tech as if checking the lights, slid a small USB across the console, and whispered, "Play this when I nod." The technician hesitated, then nodded. The signal flashed through Liam's chest like a drumbeat. This was the point of no return. Halfway through Grant's sanctimonious speech, the projector blinked. The corporate logo vanished. A familiar, rough voice filled the hall. Grant, drunk and arrogant, boasting into a phone. "Don't worry, babe. I buried the inspector with cash. The city's in my pocket." Liam signs whatever I tell him. The audio grabbed ears, like a hand pulling a curtain aside. Confusion rippled into shock. The next clip slammed the room harder. Amber and Grant laughing in a hotel suite, champagne bubbles and intimate familiarity. The third segment was clinical scan permits, duplicated signatures, invoices routed to shell companies, transfers routed through ghost subcontractors. Each file had timestamps and bank trails. The final clip was the clincher. Grant's own voicemail, admitting bribes. Phones lit up. Reporters whispered into their recorders like bees. Grant's face blanched. Amber's hand went slack at his elbow. Investors' smiles collapsed into alarm. In the swirl, city officials shifted their weight, looking suddenly small and ashamed. Liam didn't watch the fall. He watched the seeds he'd planted take root. The technician, eyes wide, mouthed, "I'm sorry," then left the console to the storm. Within 48 hours, headlines ate the air. Weston Development CEO under federal investigation. Grant was escorted from his office in cuffs. The SEC opened audits. Amber's accounts were frozen as investigators traced transfers that named her as a beneficiary. The investors who'd toasted Grant's promises now called their lawyers. The company's phone lines filled with analysts and angry partners who'd been cut out of books they assumed were clean. Liam stood in the press crush one morning while cameras circled like vultures. He'd planned it all to the letter, no slips, no gloating, but one thing had shifted. The hollowness he had felt in private swelled into a strange, steady calm. He had not sought public revenge for its own sake. He'd wanted truth. Watching Grant led away, he thought of a different light, the one that would let his son find a life unshadowed by theft. He moved quietly then, toward legal doors he'd kept well-oiled. His attorney filed a sealed motion for custody based on new evidence and the DNA Logan had secured. The Harringtons, who loved the boy and had paid for treatments, were contacted through compassionate counsel, shown documents in a private room, and the DNA report Liam had insisted remain confidential until the law moved. He refused press contact. He refused to turn the boy into a headline. Everything was surgical paper signed, affidavits sworn, medical plans prepared for the boy's spinal care. At night, exhausted from courtroom preparation and media rebuttals, Liam sat in a small office and listened to Logan's updates. "They'll cooperate," Logan said softly. "They're decent people." They didn't know. Relief and grief braided inside him, relief that his son had been cared for, grief for the years stolen. He kept that grief private because the boy would arrive soon, and the first steps Liam planned to teach were gentleness and truth. When the judge granted a temporary custody hearing, Liam felt the world tilt forward. The public storm had done its work. Grant's empire crumbled. Amber's safety net shredded, but for Liam, the reckoning was not done. He had saved something more precious than a company's reputation. He had started the long, careful work of bringing his son home, and with that, everything else, justice, rebuilding, the slow repair of a life would follow. The day the court ruled in his favor, Liam didn't celebrate. He simply sat in the parking lot, both hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the paper that confirmed what his heart had always known: his son was alive and finally coming home. The drive to Aspen felt unreal, the highway stretching like a quiet promise. His attorney had handled the legal transfer with grace, ensuring the Harringtons would remain part of the boy's life as godparents. They had wept when they said goodbye, but there was understanding instead of bitterness. They'd raised him with love. Liam would raise him with truth. He parked outside the white brick house, his chest heavy with nerves. The front door opened before he could knock. A kind-looking woman, Mrs. Harrington, stood there holding the hand of a thin, fragile boy in braces. The child's brown hair glinted in the sunlight, his eyes the same soft green Liam saw every morning in the mirror. He looked up shyly, unsure, while Mrs. Harrington said, "He's been told you're his biological father." He's nervous but excited. Liam knelt slowly, meeting the boy's gaze. "Hi, buddy," he said, softly. "I'm Liam." The boy tilted his head. "You're my dad?" The word cracked something open inside him. Liam smiled, though his voice trembled. "Yeah, I'm your dad." The boy looked at the ground, then whispered, "Do I have to stop loving them?" Liam's throat tightened. "No, son. You don't ever have to stop loving good people." Tears burned his eyes when the boy's small hand slid into his. "Can we go home now?" Home. It didn't feel real until the boy's voice said it. In the weeks that followed, Liam built a life around his son. Physical therapy sessions, laughter over breakfast, quiet nights reading stories that turned to lessons about courage. The boy couldn't walk unaided, but he had determination in every small breath. Liam turned one of his guest rooms into a therapy space: mirrors, rails, mats, and sunlight. He hired a live-in caregiver to help, Maya Rivers, a gentle woman in her late 20s whose calm strength filled the house with warmth. From the moment she arrived, Maya connected with the boy as though she'd been born for it. She didn't treat him as fragile. She treated him as powerful. When he stumbled, she laughed with him, not at him. When he succeeded, she clapped like it was a miracle. Within a month, the boy was standing longer, his muscles learning faith again. Sometimes, Liam stood by the doorway, watching them. The way Maya spoke softly, the way she carried light into every room, she reminded him of something he'd forgotten existed. Kindness that expected nothing in return. One evening, as the sunset poured gold across the living room, Liam heard his son's laughter, a bright, full sound he hadn't heard before. He stepped closer, heart pounding. The boy was holding onto the rail, shaking, sweat on his forehead. Maya whispered, "You can do it. One more step." He took one, then another, then miraculously let go. For a few seconds, he stood on his own. Then his knees wobbled, and Maya caught him before he fell. Liam's vision blurred as he knelt beside them, voice cracking. "You did it, son." The boy grinned, breathless. "Did I, Dad?" "You did," Liam whispered, pulling him close. "You really did." That night, after the boy fell asleep, Liam stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in years, the world felt alive again. Maya walked in quietly, carrying a cup of tea. "He's strong," she said. "So are you," Liam replied, eyes soft. Their gazes met, and for a brief second, the silence between them was more honest than any words. He didn't know it yet, but that woman, the one who'd helped his son walk again, was tied to his past in a way that would soon make him question everything he thought he understood about fate, love, and betrayal. The weeks that followed felt like sunlight after a long winter. The house that had once echoed with silence now carried the sound of laughter, soft music, and the light patter of small braces on tile floors. Liam found himself smiling again, the kind that came without effort. He hadn't realized how much peace could live inside ordinary moments. The smell of breakfast, the hum of cartoons, Maya's voice reading bedtime stories to his son. She had a way of filling every space without demanding any of it. Each morning she brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, humming quietly as the boy stretched on the mat. Liam often stood by the doorway, arms crossed, pretending to supervise, but really he was just watching her. She spoke to his son like every word mattered, her patience endless. Her laughter came from a place untouched by cruelty. It wasn't long before his son started calling her Miss Maya, with the kind of affection that melted walls. One Saturday afternoon, Liam joined them on the porch as the boy worked with a new leg brace. Maya crouched beside him, guiding each careful movement. 1, 2, now shift your A. "Wait," she said gently. "I can't," the boy grunted. "You can," she whispered, "and you will." The boy's face tightened with effort. He lifted one foot, stepped forward, and didn't fall. For a moment, Liam forgot to breathe. The boy laughed, arms thrown wide. "Dad, Miss Maya, look!" Maya cheered and clapped. Liam felt tears press against his throat. He hadn't felt this alive in years. That night, when Maya came to the study to review the therapy reports, Liam thanked her. "You've done more for him in a month than any doctor in 7 years, he said softly. She smiled modestly. He just needed hope. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. There was something about the way she said it, something that sounded like experience. For the first time, Liam noticed the faint scar near her wrist, the slight exhaustion behind her eyes. She carried her own past like a weight she'd long learned to balance. They spent more evenings talking after the boy went to bed. He learned that Maya had once been a top student in social sciences, but something happened she never said what that forced her to leave school. She'd cared for her sick parents afterward, taking any job she could. Despite everything, she still smiled as if the world owed her nothing. One rainy evening, while sorting through old boxes, Maya stumbled upon a photograph that slipped out from a folder. She picked it up and froze. 2 girls smiling in college uniforms, one of them was her. The other was Amber. The color drained from her face. She turned the photo over Amber and Maya freshman year. Her hands trembled. Memories flooded back like ghosts. Late-night study sessions. Amber's fake sweetness. The betrayal. The expulsion. The humiliation that had changed her life. When Liam walked in, She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" he asked. She hesitated, voice barely above a whisper. "Liam, your ex-wife. I knew her." He frowned, stepping closer. "Knew her? She was my roommate in college," Maya said slowly, her voice trembling. "We were friends, until she framed me for theft and got me expelled. She wanted the same rich boyfriend I was dating. She lied, destroyed my name, and took him. I lost my scholarship, my degree, everything." Liam's pulse stilled. "The boyfriend Grant," she finished bitterly. The air went still. 2 lives, once strangers, now tangled by the same villains. Liam sat down, his heart pounding. The revelation hit like lightning. Fate had not brought him peace by accident. It had brought him a witness, a survivor of the same betrayal that had shattered his life. Maya looked at him, tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd see her again. And now, I'm helping raise her child's brother." Liam reached for her hand, his voice soft but certain. "No, Maya, you're helping heal my son, and maybe both of us." Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky, echoing the truth neither of them could deny: some betrayals never die. They only wait for justice. Liam hardly slept that night. The photograph lay on the desk between them, edges curling like the past, refusing to stay buried. He stared at Amber's smiling face until his vision blurred. Everything connected now. Every wound, every lie, every loss threaded through that same cruel grin. Maya's betrayal years ago had been the first brick in a wall that later caged him. She had destroyed 2 lives and called it ambition. By morning, the decision was clear. He wasn't finished. Grant was gone, stripped of his fortune and reputation. But Amber still walked free, pretending to be a victim of circumstance. The justice system would crawl. He needed closure that hit harder than prison bars ever could. He drove downtown to a cafe across from the courthouse, the kind of place where whispers didn't echo. When Maya joined him, her hair damp from the rain, she slid into the seat across from him without speaking. He showed her a small envelope, the last one Logan had delivered. Inside were records Amber had hidden under her maiden name. Offshore accounts, small deposits she thought unnoticed, enough to prove she had profited from Grant's corruption. Liam's tone was calm. "She'll have to face them now, publicly." Maya watched him quietly. "Will that be enough for you?" "It's not for me," he said. "It's for every person she's ever crushed." She nodded slowly, understanding the line between vengeance and justice had blurred long ago. 2 days later, Amber was summoned to a follow-up hearing tied to Grant's fraud case. She walked into the courtroom, dressed in gray, makeup carefully painted over exhaustion. She scanned the crowd and froze when she saw Liam sitting in the gallery, calm, collected, eyes steady. For a second, panic flashed across her face. She thought he'd moved on. She thought he'd forgotten. He hadn't. The prosecutor stood, voice firm. "Your Honor, new evidence has surfaced linking Mrs. Amber Carter to the concealed accounts funding Mr. Weston's shell operations." Amber's mask cracked. "That's not possible," she snapped. The prosecutor held up printed transfers. "These are your signatures." Her breath caught. Those were business expenses. "Funded by embezzled money," the prosecutor replied. "Money transferred the same week your husband filed a whistleblower affidavit." The courtroom buzzed. Amber turned toward Liam, eyes wide, mouth trembling. He simply looked at her, no anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet stare of a man who had already buried the pain she'd given him. "Mr. Carter," the judge asked, "would you like to make a statement as the reporting witness?" Liam stood, voice measured. "No, Your Honor. The evidence speaks for itself." Amber's eyes filled with tears as officers approached. "Liam, please," she whispered, shaking her head. "You can't let them do this. We have kids." He cut her off gently. "My child is home, Amber. The others have their real father. Everyone's where they belong." She reached for him, but the cuffs clicked around her wrists. As they led her away, her sobs echoed off the courtroom walls. Outside, the sky opened up, rain soaking the city. Liam stepped out, the storm washing the last traces of bitterness from his face. Maya waited by the car, an umbrella in hand. When he reached her, she didn't say anything, just offered the umbrella, their fingers brushing. "She's gone?" Maya asked softly. "She's facing what she earned," he replied. They walked in silence toward the car. Halfway there, Liam stopped, looking at the gray skyline. "It's strange," he said. "For years, I thought revenge would feel like victory. It doesn't. It feels like ending a story I never wanted written." Maya squeezed his hand. "Maybe now you can start a new one." He looked at her, the storm reflected in her eyes, and felt something shift gentler, lighter. The kind of peace that doesn't come from winning, but from letting go. As they drove home, the rain softened into mist. In the rearview mirror, the courthouse disappeared behind them, just another shadow swallowed by time. The house felt different now. The air was lighter, as though the ghosts that once lingered in every room had finally been exorcised. Weeks had passed since Amber's sentencing, and the silence she left behind was no longer hollow, it was peace. Liam's son's laughter had become the home's heartbeat, and Maya's presence stitched their days together with a calm that no amount of money could buy. On a bright morning, sunlight spilled across the living room floor. Liam stood by the window, watching his boy shuffle carefully between the railings Maya had set up. The braces gleamed under the light. "Just one more step," Maya encouraged, her voice firm but full of warmth. The boy grinned, sweat on his brow. "I can do it." He lifted his right foot, then his left, slow, trembling, determined, and for the first time, walked unaided, 3 full steps before falling into his father's arms. Liam caught him, both of them laughing and crying at once. "You did it," Liam whispered, pressing his forehead to his son's. "You really did it." Maya clapped her hands, tears glistening. "You're stronger than you think, champ." The boy smiled proudly, his small chest heaving. "Miss Maya, I'm gonna run one day." "And you will," she promised, her voice catching. As the boy went to rest, Maya lingered by the window, wiping her eyes. Liam approached her quietly. "You gave him something no doctor ever could." She looked at him, hesitant. "What's that?" "Belief," he said softly. "You made him believe in himself again. You made me believe again." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what we were both missing." He studied her for a moment, the curve of her face, the kindness behind her eyes, the quiet resilience that had carried her through betrayal, loss, and rebuilding. She was nothing like Amber, no pretense, no arrogance, no cruelty, just truth. That evening, after his son had fallen asleep, Liam found Maya in the garden watering the small rose bushes she'd planted weeks ago. The dusk painted her in gold. "You could have gone anywhere," he said quietly. "Why stay here?" She hesitated, lowering the watering can. "Because this place feels safe. Because here I'm not someone's mistake. I'm just home." He stepped closer. "You saved my son. You healed something in both of us. I don't want to imagine this house without you in it." Her eyes softened. "Liam," he reached for her hand, "stay. Not as his caregiver, as part of this family." For a long moment she just looked at him, eyes shimmering. Then she whispered, "Yes." The night that followed wasn't grand or cinematic. It was quiet, 2 souls sitting on the porch, their fingers intertwined, fireflies blinking around them like tiny stars. For once there was no pain behind Liam's silence, no ghost behind Maya's smile. Inside, his son slept soundly, dreaming not of hospitals or therapy, but of running. And outside, under a moon that looked like forgiveness, Liam finally understood something that had eluded him all along. Revenge ends a story, but love begins one. As the wind brushed through the trees, Maya leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Maybe this is what healing feels like." He smiled, his voice low, steady. "No, Maya, this is what living feels like." The night settled around them, gentle and complete. The pain that had once defined him faded into the distance, replaced by the steady rhythm of a new beginning. Somewhere in that stillness, Liam Carter, the man who'd been betrayed, broken and reborn, finally came home. 3 years later, the city had changed its skyline again. New towers rising where old ones had fallen, each beam of glass and steel a reflection of renewal. The Carter Urban Foundation for Children with Disabilities hosted its first annual charity gala at the very hall where Liam once watched his world collapse. Tonight, light streamed through the same windows, but it felt different, warmer, softer, earned. Guests filled the room, laughter mixing with violin music. At the center of the crowd stood Liam Carter, now clean-shaven, confident, dressed in a dark suit that fit a man who had nothing left to prove. On his left stood Maya, radiant in an emerald dress that shimmered when she moved, her hand resting gently on his arm. On his right, their son, walking without braces, steady and proud, held a microphone. The boy smiled nervously at the crowd. "My name is Noah Carter," he said, his voice small but sure. 3 years ago, I couldn't walk. Today, I can run. And it's because my dad and Miss Maya believed I could." The room erupted into applause. Liam blinked hard, his heart swelling until he thought it might burst. He'd built empires before, but none like this. This was the only one that mattered. When the speeches ended, Maya turned to him, her eyes glistening. "You did it, Liam. You turned pain into purpose." He shook his head softly. "We did it." As the band played a slow song, they danced. The crowd faded. For a moment it was just the two of them, the builder who'd lost everything, and the woman who'd helped him rebuild from ashes. The air smelled of champagne and roses, but beneath it all was something simpler: peace. After the gala, Liam stepped outside for a breath of cool night air. The city hummed below, headlights flickering like restless fireflies. He turned toward the quiet street and froze. Across the road, near the shadowed edge of the parking lot, a woman swept litter into a bag. The fluorescent light flickered over her face. Amber. She looked smaller now, her posture bent, her once golden hair dull beneath a cheap wig. When she saw him, she froze too. For a few seconds, neither moved. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint echo of music from the gala behind him. Their eyes met across the street. No anger, no triumph, just recognition. Amber's lips parted. "Liam?" Her voice cracked. He didn't answer, he simply gave a slow nod. Not forgiveness, not pity, just finality. Then he turned and walked away, the reflection of the gala lights fading behind him as he rejoined Maya and Noah waiting by the car. From across the road, Amber watched the family drive off the man she'd once mocked, now living the life she'd sold for greed. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were too late, too hollow. She turned back to her work, the broom scraping against the pavement. In the car, Noah leaned against Maya's shoulder, half asleep. "Dad," he murmured, "are we going home?" Liam smiled faintly at the rearview mirror, where the reflection of his son's bright eyes met his own. "We already are, son. We already are." The road stretched ahead, glowing under the city lights. For the first time, the future didn't frighten him. It welcomed him quiet, steady, full of promise. As the car disappeared into the night, the city skyline gleamed like a testament to second chances. Revenge had ended his pain, but love had rewritten his life. And in that gentle hum of tires against asphalt, Liam Carter finally found the sound he'd been chasing for years: peace, pure and absolute. Dear viewers, life sometimes breaks us in ways we never expect, not through enemies, but through the people we once trusted most. Liam's story reminds us that revenge may bring justice, but forgiveness brings peace. You see, true strength isn't about how loud you fight when you're broken. It's about how quietly you rebuild when no one believes you still can. Never underestimate the power of silence, patience, and self-control. They are the weapons that turn pain into power and betrayal into wisdom. Because in the end, success, not anger, is the loudest revenge. Now I'd love to hear from you. If you were in Liam's shoes, would you have exposed his wife and boss, or walked away quietly to rebuild your life? Do you believe forgiveness is possible after such betrayal? Or should justice always come first? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinions might just inspire someone who's walking through their own storm tonight.